So, moving on to another obviously widely requested subject that I've had asked to me since the last episode of the Hardy Complex about a month ago. Um, it was the weigh-in of the whole Hernastly debacle. Obviously, it's very clear. A month ago, I gave you the update that there were big rumors that Hernastly was preparing to ask for his release from USW, which ended up kind of sort of being confirmed and kind of sort of not being confirmed. Um, when it comes down to it, the story has sort of been a little bit difficult to follow and tricky to follow, so I'll kind of walk you by it step by step in case you haven't been familiar with the overall position. So, quite frankly, Hernastly, about 2 years ago now, a little over 2 years ago, won the World Heavyweight Championship. He became the World Heavyweight Champion on the Friday Night Severity roster by using his key and case contract to pick up the belt off of, I believe it was Western Light. That may have been Crimson. No, I think it was her. I think it was Hernastly. Hernastly cashed in or whatever, utilized the key and case against Western Light at Call to Greatness against Dustin Raymond to become the new world champion. People didn't like it at first, but when he came to USW, there was already a lot of people that kind of looked at the guy and thought to themselves, he's got star potential. And he absolutely has star potential. There's no doubting that. But it took quite a while for them to really pull the trigger on it. The big case was trusting Hernastly as the world champion. They didn't really know how to do so. He was the first key and case winner in USW. Obviously, the match stipulation moved over from WOW to USW in the relaunch and rebranding. So Hernastly got that little copious honor, and he held on to the case for, God, I think it was 2 or 3 years. And once there were no key and case holders left, they made it back to the Money in the Bank stipulation where you have it and you have to use it within a year. So he held on to it for 2 or 3 years. He eventually utilized it and won the World Heavyweight Championship from Western Light. And people didn't really like that at first, but then he started putting on phenomenal matches as the world champion. And he started really fighting and showing heart. And he very quickly gained a shit ton of support and love from the USW fan base, which is extremely difficult to do, especially when they don't really have the biggest reason to care for you. It's a huge, huge deal to be able to manage, to accomplish that. And Hernastly did it. And eventually he lost the world title to Crimson Red, who did the same thing that Hernastly did, except he had a little bit of a character to him. Rather than a valiant babyface defending the world championship at any and all costs, he was standing up to the performers that the USW fan base hated. He was making it clear and making it very well known that not every performer was bred for the business, and he was going to single out those that didn't deserve to be in the business and show them for what they were. And that was, well, individuals that didn't belong there. And he did it, and people got behind him quickly. And Hernastly and Crimson Red both became the Daniel Bryans of USW. It's sort of what James is now, except with James, it's a different case because he was built up to that consistently for 3 or 4 years. So ever since he walked in the door, he was there was this lead up to it. And Hernastly was a fantastic world champion, and he was treated as a main eventer on Severity. And then his stock kind of diminished a little bit because there was a whole little storyline in which Martin Reese, the Severity general manager and commissioner, hated Hernastly and Crimson Red, the idea of them being the world champion. And he had his own idea of what a world champion is, and that was a slim, well-shapen, taller, and more athletic individual. Not a guy like Hernastly, who's on the shorter spectrum, kind of like my kind of spectrum of pro wrestling, where he's short but strong and very athletic. Or Crimson Red, who is kind of average size in terms of build and height and weight, but is extremely competitive. He had his own version of, or his own idea that Hernastly Crimson Red didn't fit the bill. And eventually he got to a point where the storyline was him having Austin Atomic as his bred-to-be World Heavyweight Champion. And Austin Atomic took the title off of Crimson Red. Hernastly never took the title off of Crimson Red. So it was Austin Atomic versus Crimson Red and Hernastly, but Hernastly sort of fell by the wayside. So at Warzone 2, it was a pay-per-view in which if you won, you got to stay on the brand that you were currently on, and if you lost, you were moving on to the other brand. So if you were a member of Intensity and you lost a match against another member of Intensity, you would be forced to leave and move to the Severity branch, or the Severity brand. And the same would go for the other. And Hernastly lost to Crimson Red in a global championship match, I believe, and was forced to leave Severity and go to Intensity. Now, Hernastly got to the Intensity brand, and they didn't know what to do with him. They, for the past couple of months, had been trying to build up guys like Samuel North and Weiler as guys to be main eventers, because they didn't have a lot of capability to be able to build, anybody else other than, guys with the names Majigeta or Darren Carter or Zack Hardy as main event guys. They were kind of struggling to find their way of doing that. And Hernastly, sadly fell by that kind of, siding, where they were trying to build people's characters, but Hernastly was already a built character. So people already wanted to see him succeed, but they were focused on building up a shit ton of performers as world championship material, as main event guys. And that was a little bit different from what USW was doing at the time. They didn't have a lot of guys that were already kind of built that were on Intensity to be world champions, and they had to build stars quickly. And so they tried it with Hernastly. It didn't really work out because they already had a plan ahead of mind that they just kind of subjected onto Hernastly, and Hernastly started falling by the wayside. And he went from becoming a world champion and a main eventer on Severity, a big storyline for that brand, to pre-show matches and mid-card matches in Intensity, in a world or in an environment where he was much more suited for main event caliber than a bunch of the guys they were grooming for that spot to begin with. And that's been going on for about the past year and a half. So the long-running rumor was that Hernastly was not happy with USW and was looking for a way out of the brand, and was looking for a way out of the company. And the more and more that would be talked about, the less, the less you would hear about it, because of the fact that it would, continue to go on longer. But everybody had realized, well, it's been 6 months, 7 months, 8 months now. Probably not going to happen now. So why bother waiting? You know what I mean? Why bother assuming that he's going to, pick up his bags and leave? But it was very obvious that he was not content with it. And months passed without him being in the main event picture. And then they gave him a chance, and they put him in a match against me, Zack Hardy, at Insanity earlier this year in January for the USW title. It was one-off. He lost, but he had a fantastic match. So myself and Hernastly had a fantastic match, and that got people really excited. They were like, maybe they'll do something more Hernastly this time. And they didn't. Shut up! And, sorry, cats can't, go without attention if you give them too much. Anyway, so that was the case, and nothing happened. And then the rumors finally got, everything spilled the beans about a month ago, when the heavy rumor was that Hernastly was preparing to leave USW, to ask for his release. And then a week went by, and the talk was high, and it came to the moment where everybody realized he was meeting with the board members on that day, and he met with them. And at that point in time, there was talk about a stipulation he put in place. So they still needed him to work Vendetta, which is on the 9th of September. And he will be facing... I know it's on the pre-show. It's a handicap match. What's the name? The Wine Cellar. He'll be facing the Wine Cellar. It's Norse Cadavery, Zach Arden, and Xavier King. It's going to be a 3-on-1 handicap match, and that is expected to be his last match. If, the stipulation doesn't go through. So with that being said, now you've kind of got a backstory. You see why everything's happening and what the reason for it being is. Now it's time for the take, the big brainchild of what I'm thinking, and I guess what you all tuned in for, other than the new news. And the new news is essentially this. Hernastly has asked for his release on grounds. And the grounds and stipulations are he wants a fair shot at the World Championship picture, or the main event picture. He wants a couple of months to be treated like a main eventer to prove that he can do this. Or if not given a shot at the main event kind of position, at least a way to work up quickly into that position, so that way they can move him into it, and it can be natural, and it can be sustainable, and it can be something that he can use and prove that he's worthy of a main event spot. So something like a red belt championship reign or a blue belt championship reign, something along those lines. So that's the stipulation. And the big news is, if that happens, fantastic. If it doesn't, then that's it. His contract expires in February 2019, which means we have just under 5 months before his contract expires and he's gone from the company. So they've got about 5 months to be able to decide what they want to do with him and how they want to do it with him. And when it comes down to it, the decision has to be made probably before the end of January, so that way everything can get put in place. And when it comes down to it, my thoughts on this are the same. If the company wants to do something great with him and big with him, something that he deserves to be given, an opportunity that he deserves to be given, then fantastic. Great. I'm on board with it 110% of the way through. Then in that kind of position, I would hope that he would succeed. But when it comes down to it, I don't expect a whole lot from the Intensity creative team, because they book well in advance. I wouldn't be surprised if they had booked everything up to Called Greatness by now, and we're just leaving room in case somebody got hurt or somebody had to take time off or whatever it may be. So I don't exactly know how they can really work around that. But when it comes down to the stipulation, Hernastly leaving would be a big blow to the company. He is a fantastic performer, and wherever he goes, there are going to be a litany of fans that will follow him while staying with USW, that will follow his journey wherever else he goes. It doesn't matter whether it's on the independent circuit, whether it's Impact in Japan, Ring of Honor, any developmental branch, any Canadian outlet, any U.S. territory sort of thing. That would be the case. I hope the best for Hernastly. I can't say that enough. He is a fantastic performer. My match with him earlier in January was one of the matches that I think gets the least amount of credit in his ground, and that I think a lot of people gloss over when talking about my year, because of the fact that directly after that match, James and I started the whole program that led to his coronation as the future of USW. So a lot of people, I think, overshadow my match with Hernastly and the impact that it had, simply because of the fact that after that match, and after the conclusion of that match, we would directly put into a storyline that shined through to the face of the future of the company. So it was kind of a coronation kind of thing that overlooked Hernastly and my match, which I think is sad, because it was a great match, and I'm very proud of that match, and I'm very proud of Hernastly. He's a fantastic performer. He's come a long way since 2013, and I want what's best for him, obviously. We're all family in USW, and when it comes down to it, he's a fantastic dude. And much like any man that has the capability of standing up for themselves, I think that if he's done putting up with the bullshit, and he sees how much bullshit he's had to put up with and how little he's gained from putting up with that bullshit, then he damn right is in the right to choose whether he wants to walk away from the bullshit or not. Or, in this case, give the company an ultimatum. Do what he was born. Let him do what he was born to do, or let him go and do it somewhere else. I hope the company does something with him. He's a fantastic talent. I would hate to lose him from the locker room. But I hold little hope in terms of the creative team and the creative staff, because unless a whole boatload of things are not working, much like Severity right now, there's a whole boatload of different directions they could go in. Unless there's a whole boatload of problems with the current product, they stick to their guns. Again, we're in the end of August. I wouldn't be surprised if they had every show booked out until the end of April in Chicago with Called Greatness 14. So with that, I mean, if that is the case, they'd have to find a way to work everything with Hernastly into it, which they're very capable of. They managed to do that with me When I showed up to the company, they managed to do that with Washington once he's and his like depressed and agonized persona against Morbid, this desperate kind of character came through. They worked around that. They worked around James's popularity. They worked around Hernastly's and Crimson Red's popularity. They worked around the whole motion to have Austin Atomic somewhat succeed. They worked with myself and Majigeta in 2014 with our feud. They worked with Kenan wanting to leave the company for a little bit. So they managed to do it. But I don't know if they do it now. Because honestly, I'm not in those creative meetings. I'm not in those board meetings. I can't tell you what they're thinking. But I can't help but think to myself that there's a small portion of the Intensity creative team, which is very different from the Severity creative team. There's a small portion of me that feels as though there's a reason why the Intensity team didn't shoot the gun or pull the trigger on Hernastly when they could have. I don't know whether it's a lack of trust in holding him long term as a main event solution. I don't know if it is the idea that his popularity may not continue. I don't know if it's a fear that he may get hurt when they're mid-push. But what I do know is there's a reason for everything. And while the reasoning for his lack of a push when he came to Intensity and had a whole world of options open to him, while I think that the reasoning for that example, or for the reasoning why his lack of a push was because of the idea that they were trying to book a bunch of performers in a main event picture so quickly that they may have felt like they had more time with Hernastly, or that Hernastly was too different from what they were doing to the point where they couldn't lose focus of what they were doing, especially in an era where Intensity back in 2017 was kind of drowned of a lot of talent. It was like damage control. Well, I believe that could be the reasoning for it, and that could be not an excuse, but the biggest reason for it. I think there could be a small, if not bigger, reason than that. And if there is, then it most likely is an idea of a lack of trust in Hernastly for one reason or another. Doesn't matter whether it's the possibility of him getting injured mid-push, or that fear, or them not trusting him in the main event picture, or what it may be. But when it comes down to it, there might very well be a bigger reason to it than just that. And that's what I fear the most. Because Hernastly is a great performer. He's a fantastic character, and he holds himself extremely well. He's a guy in the locker room that when you walk up to and have a conversation with him, you don't want to blow your brains out. You know, you want to sit there and have a 20-minute conversation and then want that conversation to go on for 10 minutes longer. You know, I've been doing this longer than he has. I've been doing this since I was 7 years and 11 months old, and he's been doing it for like 5 or 6 years. I've been doing this over a decade now, and I've still learned shit from Hernastly. And he's helped me in a way. And there's a lot to learn from him. He's a great guy that deserves a chance. And when it comes down to it, I hope he gets that chance. But seeing as at the moment they are very, very high on keeping that USW championship on James, probably up till Called Greatness, and they are very high in having Kevin Storm and Zack Hardy and Philip Akron be those headpieces in the title picture, with guys like Dwayne Porter and Mr. Anthony and Chain Reaction and Tyreek Carver and all of these guys moving up, the whole Vigilante group, situation. Benny Franklin, Ezra Hills when he comes back, Derek Carter's always in the mix. I mean, there's a big reason right there to look at that and see a big flurry of main event caliber talent, with a lack of opportunities for guys like Weiler and Seth, when you've got James, Kevin Storm, Philip Akron, Zack Hardy, Derek Carter, Chain Reaction, Mr. Anthony, Dwayne Porter, Tyreek Carver, all in that focus. And I think it's hard to imagine another performer being implemented into that main event picture, even if it is a guy like Hernastly. And I think it's way too congested for USW's Intensity team to be able to put him in there without hurting the product. So they're in a corner. and it's kind of damage control. And the big picture with Hernastly is, if he does leave, what happens after that? I think the big idea is that if he were to leave and go onto the independent circuit or anywhere else, if he were to have extreme success there, that may lead to a number of USW performers leaving as well if they weren't getting the opportunities. USW has always been a family. Management has been fantastic. It's always been caring for the performers. And they've always had the checks go in. They've always had an opportunity for success, but a lot of those guys don't see opportunities very often and want to make them for themselves. And you can't always get that. And that's not always given. You can't always have those opportunities. And people don't leave USW even without those opportunities because they still get a paycheck that keeps them going by. But if they can make more money and do better work elsewhere, then they're more prone to leave. But so many people don't leave because so few people do. And even those few people that do, very, very, very few actually have success elsewhere. Simon Saint did pretty damn well in the independent scene, but came back to USW because of the fact that it was just more stable in USW. You had a better schedule, a more balance over your schedule. Derek Carter was the only guy that succeeded out of USW or WOW long term. That's because he went to another promotion and just was a fantastic snarky cuck as a heel. And it's great. And he was great. And he's probably the biggest example of success out of USW from a former USW performer. And of course, you've had guys like dare I say Rush, who ended up getting fired from USW, but did pretty well in music, and it does acting now. When I left USW, I started a band that keeps going now, and we're getting a little bit of traction. And when it comes down to it, that's somewhat a success. But I wouldn't be able to leave USW tomorrow and then release an album and make multi-million dollars. You know what I mean? So when it comes down to it, there's very, very, very little room for success outside of USW. And if Hernastly were to leave USW and succeed elsewhere, extremely succeed elsewhere, and make just as much, if not more, money than he makes now, and do better work, if not just as good of work as he does now elsewhere, then that opens the door for the possibility for a lot of performers to leave. Guys like Weiler, guys like the Martin Brothers and Anarchy and Chain Reaction, Otis Crane, Alexander Rotten, Chris Ross, guys who feel like they can be doing so much more and are kind of restricted. And a lot of people don't do that because they would rather have that paycheck. Even if they feel confident in themselves, they have that stable paycheck no matter what it may be. USW rarely even releases guys unless they have nothing for them but see a future for them and know that they can succeed if they put their mind to it. And it's up to those performers to pull the trigger on that or not. But when it comes down to it, if you see a guy succeed and you think you're just as good as him, if not better, and can do better work than him, and he succeeds, you're most likely to go, well, they're not giving me an opportunity, and I can do just that, make more money, if not the same amount of money, if not more money, and do better work elsewhere, then I'm going to leave. And that is something that I think could tear USW down, because you've seen a shit ton of performers leave Impact Wrestling, or TNA at the time, to go elsewhere. New Japan or WWE. Same goes for Ring of Honor with WWE, and New Japan with WWE and elsewhere. Progress, Evolve, Dragon Gate, Revolution Pro, so on and so forth. USW hadn't really been bitten by that bug. And I think that Hernastly leaving, if it doesn't open up a gaping hole for a bunch of people to leave, I think it could definitely do a little bit of damage and could really damage that inner structure of the roster. Because then there's more capability for performers to leave and go elsewhere and do better and feel like they don't need to come back. And honestly, if they were to leave and be successful elsewhere, USW would probably not offer them another opportunity to come back, because at that point in time, USW is a family. Every management member loves the roster, and the roster loves a management member because they're fantastic. We work for great people, and the people that we work for have great employees. And it's a family there. And the family wants what's best for you. And they're not going to offer you a job back with them if you're doing better and can do better elsewhere rather than without them. I mean, if I were to leave USW tomorrow and become a 99-time IWGP heavyweight champion in 8 years, I don't think 8 years later they would offer me a contract unless I asked to come back, because they want guys that they can, I mean, not only just that they can build with, but at the same time, they want guys that need them to succeed. They want to help performers. And performers that have made it big time don't really need help. And the same go for Hernastly. But with that being said, that's pretty much all we got for this. So, yeah, stay tuned. Hardy Complex comes back in 60.